Welcome to Trinity Episcopal Church's Bible study focusing on dining in the kingdom of God, a look at various meals that took place in Luke's Gospel. Many of my thoughts and notes have come out of this book written by Eugene Laverdiere of the same title. Welcome to week 4. Welcome to week 4, a passage that comes to us from Luke's Gospel, chapter 10 and verse 38. This is a meeting, it's not really a banquet, but this entire event takes place in the kitchen of Martha and her sister Mary. First, here's the passage. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." Here's a look at the background of this fabulous narrative to which all of us can relate. This event takes place in the second half of Luke's Gospel, and so that whole part 2 is a long narrative of the journey to Jerusalem and the cross. So there was the Galilean ministry, and now there is the journey to Jerusalem, and it's on that journey that this encounter takes place. It's a journey that Luke mirrors again later when he writes the book of Acts, and he describes the missionary Paul traveling to Jerusalem and then to Rome. So you see some of that same kind of cadence of the travel. This family, Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus, appear in other parts of the wider gospel narrative, and so we're able to patch together quite a picture of this family. There's John chapter 11, the entire chapter devoted to Lazarus, the brother, dying and being raised from the dead. John chapter 12 is another banquet in which Lazarus, after being raised from the dead, and his family join Jesus for a meal, and Mary, the sister, anoints Jesus' feet. In this passage in Luke's Gospel, the guests who are present are Jesus and the disciples. This story is only told in Luke's Gospel, and so we remember that in a tradition in which sitting at the Master's feet means that you are a disciple of the Master, this was quite a new idea, that Mary, a woman, was a disciple of Jesus. We have another passage, Luke chapter 8, 26 through 39. It's a very famous narrative in which a man is set free from an entire legion of demons. And Luke says that afterwards, after all of that very dramatic healing, he sat at the Lord's feet and listened to him speak. And so that guy essentially became a disciple as well. There's a long biblical tradition, and we hear it clearly in this passage, of the double naming in a call to someone. And so Jesus says, "Martha, Martha," repeating her name. We remember God calling Moses, "Moses, you're standing on holy ground." Samuel, "Samuel," the call to be a prophet. Saul, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul on the road to Damascus. And so many times we hear that double naming. Eugene Laverdiere writes this about the double naming, quote, "They focus the attention of the one called on the person calling, and they alert the one called to an important announcement. The repetition of Martha's name was to draw her attention to the person of the Lord. Distracted by many things, she had been in no position to hear his word." When we look at the gathering itself, we remember that the name of the village is not given to us. In John's Gospel, we're told that this home and this family lived in Bethany, which is near Jerusalem on the east slope of the Mount of Olives. But Luke, in this passage, leaves it open to any place where Jesus arrives for a meal. And so it's more universal, any location of the communion, by not giving it a specific name. It was clearly Martha's house, and so that is unusual for a woman at the time. Perhaps she was a widow, but for whatever reason, she herself was the mistress of that house. This also points forward to the book of Acts, to a woman named Lydia in Philippi who welcomed Paul and his fellow evangelists into her home. That happens in Acts chapter 16. When we get to the section of the handout about the meal, there's not really a meal in this story. And so I guess we can assume that they did get it all worked out and ate something after this passage was over, but that is unknown to us. Teaching. The teaching here is crucial for all those who are called to any form of ministry in the Christian community, because it addresses the tension between serving and sitting there, the tension between ministry and discipleship. And so Jesus says that taking in his word is the most important, and that serving comes after that. It seems to me that being worried and distracted, that was actually the problem, not the tasks that we're calling out to be done. The many tasks are, in the Greek language, diakonion, from which we get the word in English, deacon. And so we need the work of deacons. We all need to be deacons, but we need to not be distracted, cranky deacons who haven't taken the time to hear that word. And so here are some questions to think about. How does this meal, or I guess we could call it this encounter in the kitchen, point toward a communion service? How do we find a balance between worship and serving, between learning and doing? And has the pandemic and its altering of time commitments made this any more clear to you than it was before? What do you think Martha said to Jesus as that conversation rolled to its completion? Tune in next week, same time, same place. Week 5, we'll be looking at Luke chapter 22 and verse 7, the actual institution of communion at the Last Supper.